Welcome back to the Heart of Poland programme, where every week we talk to incredible people who've done or are doing incredible things in their lives on our impossible mission to discover the heart of Poland. With me in the studio, Daniel Wyszogrodzki. Hello, Daniel.
Hello, Pat.
When I look at your career, I see an enormous body of work as an author, as a journalist, a music journalist, and as a translator.
Mainly, yeah.
If I tried to summarise that career,
I
would have quite a hard problem because you've just done so many things. What one word would you use to describe your career?
In one word, I'm a born freelancer. I was always a free spirit. I have always hated going to school because I figured I was getting my own education in my own ways. And finally, my education is a comedy of errors. I was in the math class at the high school. Then I studied medicine for 2 years because I'm a black sheep in a doctor's family. I'm the only not doctor in the family. So after a couple of years, I gave up, and then I graduated. I got my master's degree in psychology at the University of Warsaw. And finally, all these years after I got my PhD at the literature, which I think was really the closest to my heart all my life. I've always found it very easy and natural to write. I was winning all the contests since I was a little kid for writing. And my family was pressing me to become a doctor, to become somebody serious. So I chose the other path. I went my own way, and I still didn't get serious.
We've actually got 3 examples of your work here, so perhaps they speak volumes quite literally in the case of Ala Muzykala. Let's talk us through the 3 books you've got with us, which are your little symbols of Poland.
2018 was a very good year. 3 books came out. One of them, my story on the Rolling Stones, Satisfaction, a very popular book, is the 6th edition. And every so on, I just keep updating it. I wrote 2 new chapters for the Stones coming in to Poland, to Warsaw in July. They played at the National Stadium in Warsaw. And that's when this book came out, the new edition. Then, the posthumous, the last book of Leonard Cohen, whom I've known personally for many years.
Wow.
And this is my 3rd book of his poems, 3rd book in my translation. It's called The Flame, and it's Płomień. And it's got some of his latest poems, lyrics from his last albums, and a lot of selections from his notebooks. Plus his drawings, some funny stuff, some very depressing. Are we talking Leonard? So
It is current, yes.
Yeah, but my opus, the major work that came out this year is my book on the history of musicals. It covers the 100 years. It's quite a new genre comparing to opera or novels, but from 1918, which was the end of the World War I, till 2018, it's been 100 years of a contemporary musical stage, constantly developing, opening. The big opening was in the 40s and in the 60s. That was the breakthrough, really, when the musicals started to speak about some important matters for a change. And this is it. And that was my PhD at the Polish Academy of Science, Instytut Badań Literackich. I just had my dissertation in December.
And how was the book done?
The book was, it took me about 3 years altogether, with other assignments. Surely, I always do several things at the same time. So, but it was supposed to be a short, funny book, illustrated, and it's big, fat. There's no pictures in it. It would be too heavy. It's 600 pages. But I think there was a need for a book like that in Poland because there was nothing really, almost nothing on the subject in Polish. There's so much to choose from in English language. I realized that most of the musical fans, they speak language, they can find their sources, they know English. But this book is a kind of like a reference book. It's a lexicon. It's from A to Z.
Could you say it was a sort of summary of your love affair with musicals?
Yeah, it is. It is definitely. And I try to be as objective as possible. Of course, I'm not, in a way. I've been working for the musical theater. And of course, there's some stuff that I like more than the other. And but all the major titles are here, all the major creators, composers, lyricists.
So Daniel, how was the book done in terms of sales?
In terms of sales, it's doing very well because it just came out in November of last year, and by the Christmas time, by the end of December, it was gone. It was all sold out. We're waiting for it to be reprinted now. In a few days, we get more. So it's a very satisfying thing for the author and for the publisher, I assume. It wasn't a huge edition. I know Katarzyna Bonda, it was 5,000 copies, I think. But it really sold out very fast because there's a lot of following in Poland now.
Yes.
The musicals are becoming very popular.
Yes.
There's more and more theater switching into the musical repertoire. The professional musical theater like Roma, where I've been working where I have worked for a long time, they're doing better and better. They're really on the level of the West End productions now. Also, what makes me very happy is that the Polish artistic academies and colleges open new divisions, new faculties of musical actors singing. And I teach at the Theatrical Academy, which is a very old school in Poland, Miodowa Street. It was used to be called Państwowa Wyższa Szkoła Teatralna. It's a theatrical academy now. But there's a new faculty where I teach the history of musical and the history of popular music. And I keep telling the students that you guys need to know and to learn more. You got to know all that the drama actors have to know. Plus, you got to sing and dance. The requirements are very high.
Yeah, the standard is, I've definitely seen it, it's phenomenal in Poland. And Roma Theatre you've worked very closely with on many productions. I think, can you give us some of the big names?
The biggest. We've done Wojciech Kępczyński, the director, and he had the dream of showing the Polish audience the biggest musicals ever. And at the time it was Cats, The Phantom of the Opera, and Les Miserables. And I worked with him on all three of them. I translated them. My first job for the musical theater was Cats. There was kind of contest for the lyrics translation, and I was chosen. I was picked up, and I stayed in Roma for 12 years or more.
Can you break down the process? Because it must be phenomenally difficult to take something that's so loved and so well known, word for word, everybody remembers the songs, and then and bring the sense, but also the musicality of that.
It's never really word for word. See, Polish is not really fit to be sang to the musical phrase written in English, because Polish words are longer, the accents are in all different places. I don't want to get into technicalities, but sometimes it looks more like a crossword puzzle. The way I do it is I translate it by ear. I don't really read the scores. I had a couple of times. There's the two scenes in the Phantom of the Opera. The director's office. It starts with the two guys, the two directors of the theaters, and all the main characters, they join one by one, and they start singing together, and they end up as, I think, septet or octet, 7 or 8 of them singing simultaneously. So I had to look at the score, and it was really like a crossword puzzle to see where I am and where they are. It is difficult, because you got to keep the main meaning of the words, the character, the atmosphere and everything, and you have to set it to music. Also, there's another tough part, is the vowels. When they hit the high notes, you got to use the open vowels, like A, O, E. You can sing O very high, because then it becomes like U, And so there's always actors discussing the lyrics. It takes a lot of practice. Now I know what I'm doing. I think if I get commissioned now to translate Cats, the musical, I'd get scared, because it's really difficult. But it was my first job for the stage.
I must say you did a fantastic job, and one of my first memories when I first came to Poland, because I happened to know Wojciech Kępczyński's daughter randomly, was I got Cats in Polish, and actually some of my love affair with Polish began from listening to Mungo Jerry and Pumpernickel.
Oh, that's amazing, because this is really the first job I've done for the musical theatre ever.
And I remember rolling the word Pumpernickel around in my head and just enjoying the sound of it,
a translator, especially in the theatrical production, has got to be creative. You got to figure out the names, something that sounds good, that fits very well for the music, especially. And this is what makes it a very special kind of translation. Like, it's not like translating a book, or not even like translating poetry, when you can add syllables, make the lines a little longer. You can't change anything.
So have you ever had a moment where you thought, I just can't catch this, or I'm somehow too far away from the original for it to have lost its meaning?
It happened. It always happens. But the way I look at the translation is I try to be as faithful as possible. There's an old saying that is like the translation is like a woman, either faithful or beautiful. I don't really believe it. It's a cliche. I don't really believe that. I try to be faithful. And I've been asked many times, who do I have in mind when I do my translation? Of course, I remember about the actors, about the technicalities. Of course, I know I will be discussing it word by word with the director, because you got to fit his idea of what's happening on stage. But my main critic is the original author that I imagine is looking me through over my shoulder, and I want him to be happy. It doesn't matter if he's alive or not. I want him to be happy with me. So that's really how I'm doing this, and it's also difficult sometimes for the people from abroad to prove how different Polish is from English. And I had that experience with Mamma Mia, where I was very closely watched by the representatives of ABBA, and their idea of a translation was like a Google translation. They thought they would get it word for word. And we got to in this ongoing discussion, never-ending discussion, we got to the point when I was teaching them Polish grammar in English. And I can tell you, I don't even know Polish grammar. That was really tough. It took me 3 months to translate the Mamma Mia and 6 months to talk myself out of it. Yeah, it did.
To go through the experience.
Yeah, but then everybody was very happy with it. And the funny thing is that I've translated a lot of difficult stuff, like Les Miserables, and ABBA seems quite light. And I've never got any reviews as a translator before Mamma Mia. So I learned to look at it this way. If people are not saying anything about the translation, that means it's good. They listen like they listen to the original language. I took it as a compliment when the translations were not discussed. But after Mamma Mia, there was a lot of very good press that I've received. It's mainly because people are familiar with the songs of ABBA. Also, I think Polish people were quite resistant to the idea of ABBA being sung in Polish and coming to the theater. But leaving the theater, they were very happy with what they heard. So it was very good.
Well, we talked about musicals, but of course your career spans many different things. You are a man of many talents. And I read that you actually worked in New York in the 80s. How was it that you landed in New York, other than maybe escaping the doctor's route?
I landed in New York. That was funny. There was a time when it really changed my life upside down, because I got to New York as a university student for a couple of months at the fall of 1981. I just wanted to visit the city. That was the city of music to me. It was very difficult to get out of the Poland, but being a university student, it was easier, like to get a passport. And I didn't know anyone in New York. And all I knew about New York was Carnegie Hall. I could have taken you to the club where Bob Dylan, started, because I read all about it. But I didn't really know about the city, about how it is there. So I got there, and after first few weeks, there was actually a morning where this is a true story, where I woke up and went to the grocery store to get some milk. And I looked at the new edition of the New York Times. And there was this big headline, Poland declares martial law. And I wasn't sure if I get it right. I had a feeling this is what I think. And it was a martial law declared in Poland. I didn't know the words martial law, but and that made me stay. There was no way of going back. I was supposed to be here for Christmas with my grandmother in Praga, Warsaw, and I never got back. There was no way to call. There was no telephone lines, no communications. So thanks to that, I stayed there, which was a blessing, really, because when my friends were mainly wasting time here and just waiting for the whole thing to finish, I was there going to the rock concerts, traveling, visiting the different states, I was working as a salesman in the Brooklyn store, in the electronics store. I was selling radios and calculators. A Walkman was the biggest thing. There was when Sony Walkman WM1 came out.
That was huge.
Oh God, I sold hundreds of them.
Younger viewers will have to Google what a Walkman is, because they probably wouldn't even know.
It's a little cassette. Yeah.
But they were huge.
The headphones, they were huge.
Was that what you?
So there was pure coincidence.
And your love affair with music started there, or was that when you started?
I was in love with music since my childhood. And I was just following music all my life, and there was one of my dreams coming true. Really, this is this. You may find it funny, but I was discovering different kind of music in Poland as a kid, as a teenager, with no attempt to the records, but very limited attempt to the records from abroad. They were brought from some people. They were very, very expensive on the black market. You couldn't buy them in the regular store. So there was a lot of things that fascinated me, like we discovered the Beatles, the Stones, or whatever. But there was a very particular record by an American artist, Pete Seeger, the folk artist. And this record, because he was leftist, he was a leftist. So his record, the edition of his Columbia album came out in East Germany. And I got a hold of that album. There was the famous "We Shall Overcome" live at the Carnegie Hall, 1963, like a Bible of the civil rights movement. We shall overcome all freedom. Keep your eyes on the prize. And I was listening to that record, and the thing that amazed me was the audience participation, because that was the whole point of Pete Seeger concerts. He taught people how to sing. He split the voices. Women sing this, guys sing that, and there was like a 2,000, 3,000 people choir, and I just dreamed of being a part of that choir. So I went to New York with that vision of seeing Pete Seeger at Carnegie Hall, and I did, quite early. Then I did several more times. I got to know him personally, and because I had to stay. The martial law was, so that was really I know it sounds funny, it was very idealistic, very, very, I was young and very naive maybe, but music was the main force that brought me to different places. Once I got to the States, I just started to visit the famous music places like Graceland for Elvis Presley and of course Nashville and all this. I was visiting, when I was in the States, I was visiting the national parks and famous music standpoints.
So in what year did you come back to Poland? And
I came back to Poland right after martial law was lifted, because I was in the middle of my studies. I graduated, and then in the 90s I was going on and off to the States, and I acted as a correspondent. I started to work for the Polish newspaper in New York, Nowy Dziennik. It was a Polish New Daily. Well, actually it was the biggest newspaper in Polish that came out of Poland ever. And it's been coming out for several years. Now it's just only it's shrunk to the website. It's not in print anymore. But I've worked a long time for them.
You've then gone on to basically carve yourself out an illustrious career in musical journalism. I think I can use the word illustrious fairly safely in your case.
See, I did do a lot of writing for different magazines, for radio stations, and but I was always, in my life, I was always following stuff that for some reason I found interesting, original, and I tried to share that with the readers. So I'm not the kind of critic that would really criticize. I'm more of a popularizer.
Yeah, or maybe a fan, maybe
a fan. Yeah, but a fan who likes to spread to get his word out to people.
So, who would you recommend right now if somebody was interested in, the Polish, specifically Polish musical scene?
I still review records. I've been doing this for about 30 years now. The latest, the new ones by Aga Zarian, a very good jazz album in English, all in English, with her lyrics. Wonderful musicians. The latest album by Anna Maria Jopek with Manfred Bransalis, a jazz legend from the States, sax player. It's amazing how they got together and how they do jazz based on Polish traditional music. So it's a mix of different influences, and I find it very original. Also, I've been always following that genre that in Poland is called poezja śpiewana, singing poetry, because I always find it very, very, very Polish. Like Polish rock music, Polish blues music, Polish jazz music even was always an answer to the trends that came from the West. Of course, Polish jazz is a very original, very specific music now with great artists. But what happened in Krakow in the 60s, people like Ewa Demarczyk, Marek Grechuta, singing, creating music to the existing lyrics, 19th century contemporary lyrics. I found it very original and I followed that. So I realized, part of the way, I realized that my main point of interest, what I love the most, is where literature and music meet. And that got me to the musical stage. It started with singing poetry. Then I got really heavy into the singer-songwriter stuff from the States. Leonard Cohen, Bob Dylan, Bruce Springsteen, Paul Simon, this kind of stuff. And gradually, I'm still doing it on a bigger scale now, because musical is where lyrics meet the music with this whole huge spectacular production.
Would I be right in saying that Polish artists are relatively unknown outside of Poland itself?
I thought about it a lot, and I've discussed it a lot. And there was a music conference last year that I participated in, and my main message at that conference was, maybe it wasn't very nice to say, but I kept repeating, nobody's waiting for us. There's nobody ever anywhere waiting for us. We have to impose ourselves on the world. It takes such a strong personality. It's not always the best artists that make it abroad, but the strongest, the most motivated. I know some great musicians who really never get out of their apartments and they just waiting for the phone calls. And I know people who really went abroad and really almost starving just to make it. And it happened. There's not many good examples of Polish careers, Polish musicians, especially in the States, but I followed at least one example, which was Michael Urbaniak. Because when I was a teenager, I listened to his music in Poland. Then when I went to New York in the early 80s, he was one of the top stars there, playing the best clubs, recording with all top musicians, and I met him there.
So he's saxophonist, yes.
He started as a saxophonist in Poland, but then he switched into violin. Also, he played with Miles Davis. He's the only Polish musician that plays with Miles Davis. Yeah. But Miles Davis, he said, "Oh, get me this Polish violin player," and he did play with Miles. And so that was a good example of a Polish career. We have to show something we have to show something original, and it's very difficult because Polish literature is very hard to translate. There's some great poets like Bolesław Leśmian, who's entirely untranslatable to English. It's like, the zielona zieloność, this kind of stuff. And it's just lost in the translation. But our culture, it's difficult to promote abroad, but if the people are motivated enough and if they are original enough, they make it. And the very good example right now is Wyszogrodzki, who's playing all over the world, who's playing in most European countries with the international band. His trio is a musician from Israel, one from Scandinavia, and Polish pianist. So this is a good example. But really, we can't compare ourselves to what's happening in the West, in the Western music. We got to show something different.
Why is it, do you feel that, what I sense is that this is a reflection of a slight reserve in our Polish culture that we have, where we're slightly too shy, slightly too unbecoming, where we don't have that oomph that we feel that other nations have.
It's a Polish nature. We're kind of shy. Yeah,
we are.
But
you're not shy.
I think it's the American lesson. If you can make it there, you make it everywhere. I was in New York. I didn't make it in any big time at all, but I managed to survive, which was a success at the time. I was a kid from Poland. I was 20. I was living with my grandmother in Warsaw. All of a sudden, I'm in Brooklyn. I have to support myself. I have no skills. I can become a mason, or I have no papers to become a taxi driver.
Yeah.
So I got myself a job as a salesman. And there was a good lesson of flexibility. Unfortunately, Polish people are kind of shy, unbecoming, like you said, and for some reason, and probably for historical reasons, like everything in Poland is historical, political. Probably for the historical reasons, we adopt ourselves very well and quite easily to very difficult circumstances. When the environment is friendly, we kind of get lost. We don't have this American attitude of I'm number one, I'm the best, listen to me now, I can do it like nobody can. We don't have that. I learn along the way to promote myself. And I remember starting to work at the Roma Theatre, discussing with the board of directors, how do we do our website, how do we promote ourselves, and they were kind of shy, like, oh, can we say we had a great night last night? And I would say yes, because nobody else will. If we don't say it, nobody else will. So I'm not shy in promoting myself. So I was very lucky. I got most of my jobs by accident or just by walking from the street and asking to do something. I got myself jobs for the magazines like that, and gradually it was accumulating. And another very happy coincidence to me was at the 90s, the second part of the 90s. I was translating a lot of movies for the TV, for Polish TV, and for the VHS tapes. And one of the special assignments I got was to translate Cats the musical, back then, 1998. I was called by the manager and she said, we have to discuss the salary because it's a special project. We discussed that. I really loved doing it. I was very happy to get it. And I've done it, and I forgot completely about it. 5 years go by. 2003, I got a phone call from the Roma Theatre that the director would like to talk to me because he saw it on the TV. And you know, when you do a translation for the TV, it's very basic, very simple. But with every translation, we have to solve certain problems. There's always problems involved. So, no matter how simple it was for the TV, it wasn't really following the musical score very well. It wasn't that precise as it has to be for the theater. But he liked the way I solved the problems. There's a word jellicle, you know, T.S. Eliot's poems, the old jellicle cats. There's a jellicle moon, they have a jellicle ball.
Yes.
It's the word he invented. So I was searching for a Polish word that can go for the cats, for the moon, for the ball, and I just figured the simplest possible way, dachowy. We say dachowy kot, as a stray cats, as a cats
Yes.
that live outside, they live on the roofs. There's a roof cat. So we had the roof cats, the roof ball, the roof moon, and it all fitted.
Yeah. And what's the feeling when you have that moment? You think, I've got it. Must be wonderful.
It was a wonderful feeling, but it was back then when I was doing it for the TV. So I was very happy with it, and I very quickly forgot about it because, like, done next, you know.
Yeah.
And it came back to me. So then people were asking me, oh, how did you do it? That you work for the Roma Theatre? It was a very lucky coincidence, but actually I got that through my previous jobs.
And if you had some advice for someone who's coming to Poland to listen to live music, when and where should they do that?
They should certainly look for the jazz stage wherever they are, because there's a lot of good things going on right now. The jazz was blooming in Poland of the 60s and 70s. Then it was kind of in defense. In the 80s, a lot of jazz musicians, great jazz musicians, went to work abroad. Playing on the love boats and stuff like that. So there was a lot of wasted talents back then. But now is a new generation of tremendously educated musicians, great pianists, great violin players in Poland now. There's such a strong competition now. So they should look for the clubs. If they're in Warsaw, I would definitely recommend the Nowa Scena of Roma Theatre, where they have regular jazz concerts. There's one I can't wait to hear in January. With a friend of mine playing violin with his band, David Lubowicz, and great world-class violin player. And in this similar in other cities, I would start with the jazz clubs. I don't really follow the dance scene at all, not anymore. Not that I ever did really, but also the classical music in Poland is on a level. There's a lot of very good theaters. I was happy to work for the last few years for Opera Podlaska in Białystok. Great orchestra, the best choir in Poland, and they do everything. They do opera, operetta, and musicals. We moved. That was quite unusual because we got a permission from Andrew Lloyd Webber and his really useful group agency to replicate our non-replica production from Warsaw in Białystok. That was the first time ever that they allowed a non-replica to be replicated. They did it for us because they loved the performance, they loved the production in Warsaw. And it's still being played in Białystok. But another really funny thing is, I had an idea of doing a show at Opera Podlaska. If you want to hear that.
Let's go for it.
There was. I found out there was a musical done based on the book Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak. I loved the book. We all know the movie. So I got interested. I started to listen wherever I could find, and I loved it. And I thought it was great music. Then it opened on Broadway, and it was the biggest flop ever. They played it for 7 days. So I was in this very delicate position of going to Białystok, knock knock to the manager's door, and telling him, I got this great idea. There's a show that flopped on Broadway in 7 days. We have to do it. We have to do it here. And you know what? We did. And it's a great production. It's really well. But it was, and it's very heartwarming feeling to see that something can be done better here than it was back there at the cradle of the musical theater. And on top of it, the composer, Lucy Simon, sister of Carly Simon, the singer, the pop singer, she came to Poland last November with her husband and her son. She loved it. She loved the production. She loved the theater. And she could never even envision her own music being played by the 60-piece orchestra and this huge choir. And that was so satisfying and so gratifying for us because there was like kind of proof that we can do it. Yes, we can.
Yeah. What have you got in the on the books for 2019? Surely you must have a rest from writing books and move on something a little lighter.
Well, actually, I don't want to write any more non-fiction books because it requires so much research and it's so time-consuming. And I've had enough for a while. I'd be always happy to do the translations of the poetry I love, like Leonard Cohen, whom I know in person, and I would like to get back to his early books of poetry that were never published in Poland. So I would be happy to do that. I'm having still a musical-free year. I'm not translating anything. I had this production of Saturday Night Fever in Teatr Muzyczny Gdynia, opened last spring, but I translated it way back. A few months before. And so I'm not working on any musicals now. I'm writing a book on my childhood. It's kind of a non-fiction fiction. I have very, very strong and very vivid memories of my childhood in the 60s and 70s in Poland. And I know there are a lot of books that recall the times of the PRL, the communist Poland, but they mainly written from the adult point of view. And what I'm doing now is I'm writing for the boys, from the kids' point of view. The book will definitely end on the 8th grade. 8th grade going to the high school, that's the end of it. I have a very vivid memories of that time, and I'm trying to keep them alive and put them on paper. So that's what I'm really working on now, and I will keep on traveling. Oh, you don't know that side of me. I love Poland, but I hate winter. You can hear my sore throat.
Yes, unfortunately.
This is not the best time of the year.
It's rather cold where we're recording.
So I'm already planning a trip to every winter I go to either to Caribbeans or to some really warm countries. I love it. I love Caribbeans. Last year I went to Panama. I bought it through the Panama Channel, so it was a kind of adventure. But I'm planning on going somewhere, definitely. Also, I have a bunch of friends. We go boating to Greece in June. We went last year. We're going this year. And also, I'm just waiting what the future brings, because I can tell you this: I would be the most depressed person knowing what I'll be doing in a year or two from now. I want to have that surprise from my life. I want to get something unexpected. Not necessarily an earthquake, but a new job opportunities and new assignments, new challenges. I'm waiting for it. And I have a lot of friends who say, oh, I would love to live the way you do, because I work at home. I live out of Warsaw in the country, in the forest. But they say that I would like to follow your way of living, but I got to have something that I can be, that secures me.
Yes.
And I have nothing that secures me, really. I don't need that. I can possibly worry what will happen in a year or from now. I don't know if I'll be alive from now. So I'm always very open to what comes next, and I'm very happy I don't know.
I spoke to Wojciech Kemczynski, the director of the Roma Theatre, and he assured me that today's interview with you would be interesting, engaging and illuminating. And Daniel, I think, speaking as somebody who's been to many of the musicals you've translated, you not only get the very best of the original, but perhaps in the Polish you rediscover something that wasn't there as well. I think there's a little bit of magic, there's a little bit of Polish magic in there. So on behalf of all the people who've gone to the many musicals you've translated and all the books, articles, shows, radio programs and all the other things you've done, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tremendously enjoyed speaking to you.
I'm very
Thank
happy.
you.